that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, the amazing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh?
And in the flesh. He always says in the flesh, unless I can get there first, which I rarely do. And our guest, Nick Sherrick, who has come down from All Earth Rail. And I should kind of explain this. We are recording this show and another show on the morning of December 20th. Nick came down because next week the BCTV studio will not be open, so we are recording a special show in advance, so there will be a show that week. And that special, since we can't predict what the news is going to be, we're having a special in which Nick is going to be describing work that's being done at All Earth Rail, which I think is one of the coolest things I've seen recently in Vermont.
Thanks, George.
So
we're not going to tell you much now.
I'm happy
You're
to
going
be
to watch
here.
it.
but Nick is
Stay tuned.
Nick is sitting in on the regular show so that he can comment on all the things that are going on in the world, especially in regards to transportation. We're starting off with transportation.
Love it.
But
a little bit different kind of transportation.
A little bit different kind of transportation.
Nevertheless.
Anyway, the news that we're dealing with all comes from my blog, geoharvey.com, which I post every day, 10 to 15 news articles, a synopsis of each with a link to the original. If you want to read the original, you can go to the blog, which is geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com, and we will try to tell you what the date of the news article is. We'll try to remember. We're starting on December 13th, which is a week ago today, and the news articles will go from the 13th to the 19th. If you click on the calendar at the blog, it'll take you to the 10 to 15 articles that appeared on that day. So it'll make it relatively easy to find what you're looking for.
You'll have to search.
But a little bit of searching, but it's not too bad. I've got over 30,300 articles at that website now. So searching through all of them,
is going to be confusing, isn't it?
It's pretty easy when you know what date it came on. Our first item.
Well, about now, I usually say something about
of
these articles that you have been writing about.
Yeah,
we could devote a whole show to.
Absolutely,
and some of them are well worth looking up on your own because there's a lot of good information. I'll try to remind you of some of the better ones as we go through.
Yeah,
sounds like a plan.
Some of them really. There's a lot of
some
good
of them
stuff
are
on
amazing,
some of these.
And some of them have almost no content at all. But the content that's there is worth talking about.
Well, the first one is one of those.
Yeah, it is. Our first one is from the Jackson Hole News and Guide.
We've got a picture coming up here.
We do. Let me put that picture up.
Yeah, there we go. That's Jackson Hole in
Wyoming,
and it's a very small airport that basically serves a ski area.
The thing that I find interesting about that picture is there's no propellers on that airplane.
Amazing.
Amazing. But the thing is, that is a little jet which is in an airport in the middle of the mountains.
Well, this is the Grand Tetons, you know. It's just
I know.
It's just south of
Put
Yellowstone.
That back up.
It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, but I think of a jet as needing a long runway, and those mountains don't look like they're really suited to that kind of thing.
Not much room for a long runway there.
Okay, so what do you got?
Airport switches to green power.
Jackson Hole, pardon me, spilling words out of my mouth. Jackson Hole Airport will shift to sustainable energy starting this winter and become the largest organization in the region to go green, with all of its electricity coming from Lower Valley Energy. The airport's commitment is the equivalent to the energy use of 300 average Jackson homes.
So this isn't a very big.
This is not a very big airport. It's an airport that takes the electricity equivalent to 300. Did you see what Lower Valley Energy is? I think it's wind.
Well, the wind is coming from wind farms in nearby Idaho Falls.
Ah, okay.
So they're about 50 miles away.
Yeah.
Different state, but it's 50 miles.
So it's wind power.
Yeah, I had the name of the place, but
Lower Valley Wind. It's I don't know what town.
Lower
it's in.
Valley Energy. Well, it's right outside of Idaho Falls.
Okay. Okay.
And we're moving along.
We are moving along.
And
Next item is from Clean Technica.
Current climate target puts us on track for 3 degrees of warming by 2100. That's not good news.
No, this is not good news. We've already had 1 degree. And 1 degree is what's brought us Lyme disease,
Yeah.
our moose population dying off from being bled to death by ticks, hurricanes.
Probably several.
Yeah. Last week we talked about how climate change not only has been making storms worse, but now scientists are saying there are storms happening or events
They're more
happening
frequent, too.
that would not have happened at all without climate change.
I'm sure.
So let me read this. The current state of global climate policies has the world on a path to 3 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100, twice the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit agreed on in the Paris talks 3 years ago, according to Climate Action Tracker's annual update, which was published at the COP24 talks. I should mention 1.5 degrees was the
target.
The hoped target, not the agreed target. The agreed target was 2. Nick, did you have something to say there?
No, I was not only nodding along,
Nodding along, okay.
scowling a bit.
Here, I thought you were...
Scary stuff.
Yeah, it is scary stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a takeaway here. I mean, it's 3 degrees warming isn't going to do it. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
But what they're saying, it is possible to keep warming to 1.5 C, but we have yet to see this translate into action. And some of the things we've talked about here, we really have to get serious about this.
We have to get serious. Either that, or if it takes us a year or 2 to get serious, we're going to have to spend years
We're going to have to get more serious.
being proactive about removing carbon from the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Is the only thing that I can imagine.
There's also a takeaway here, and it's a warning. There are some governments delaying global progress, including the U.S.
Yes.
And many of these countries are beginning to see the reality of climate change impacts.
Well,
but the U.S. is not one of them currently now.
I think most of the people in the United States are seeing the reality. As a matter of fact,
People are, but not the government.
Yeah. One of the things that I saw recently was a poll that had been done. I forget which pollster it was, but they said not only the majority of Americans, but the majority of Republicans, the majority of conservatives, the majority of conservative Republicans believe that climate change is happening.
Well, we'll talk about that a little later on this show.
Yes.
It's different the way they present it. If they talk about the ideas, everybody's for it. But if they say, well, this is a Democratic program, all of a sudden the Republicans walk.
Well, they should come up with an alternative plan if they're going to.
Well, it's interesting because they agree with the concepts, but they just get involved in politics.
Should we go on,
Yeah,
Tom?
I think we got
We
to
have
here.
an item here from renewables now.
We got a picture here coming up, too.
Yeah, we do indeed. And it's,
Let's get that picture up.
I forget where that is.
Where is this?
That picture, well, what do you got for a title?
Well, it says the EBRD approves new strategy focused on decarbonization of energy systems. And George, you're going to tell us what EBRD is.
I am
aren't
indeed.
you?
I forget where that is. I think that those wind turbines might be in Iran or Mongolia or someplace.
And I don't have a note to that.
I don't remember. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is the EBRD, said its board of directors approved an energy sector strategy that rules out financing coal-fired power plants, confirming that the EBRD will not finance thermal coal mining or coal-fired generation.
Hey, it's a good economic decision. Forget about green, it's good economics.
Well, one of the things that's interesting here is that this meant that they are not financing a coal-burning power plant that was scheduled to be built, and I forget which of the Balkan countries it was in, but it was in one of those.
In a coal mining region.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this article mentions that, but
Yeah.
I don't have a note on it.
Well, this article struck me, and it's interesting because I don't imagine they've made this decision purely out of the goodness of their own hearts. I think there is an economic
Oh, it's economic.
decision here,
Definitely,
right?
no
It's
question
a
about it.
smart hedge,
Definitely.
and it
Yeah.
gives me some optimism, even on my days I'm not feeling great about it.
Well, the European,
People in general, we can still make pragmatic decisions.
Yeah,
and
the
I think
European
that's
bank
what.
is a bank.
Yeah.
They're the guys lending the money.
Well,
And they're
you
turning
know,
around saying, we're not going to lend you money on coal.
Beth Pierce,
Yeah.
The Vermont treasurer.
Okay.
You know, she was a couple of years back. People were after her to divest of fossil fuels, and
Yeah, she didn't want to do it.
she didn't want to do it. She said, "I'm in this. You know, my mandate in this job is to have investments that make sense for Vermont."
Well, she has turned around, hasn't she?
I don't know, but you know, she said there was practically nothing in the portfolio for the state, so
So
it wasn't a
big
big
deal.
issue.
Yeah.
But she may have sold them because the fossil fuels industry is, you know, every time we hear about a wind farm going up, every time we hear about a state saying we're going to be 100% renewable by 2040, or a city or whatever, that means that some fossil fuels company, or the whole spectrum of fossil fuels companies, are losing customers. They don't like that.
Well, yeah, we've been talking about that, and an interesting thing is some of them, Exxon in particular, they're still selling their oil, but they're buying into renewables for their own use.
One of the things I think is funny is the mines in Australia that are putting up solar panels to power the mining equipment.
Oh,
That's interesting too. That's very interesting.
there's some irony there.
A little bit.
Well, let's move along here.
We are up to Friday, December 14th, and we have an item here from Clean Technica.
Renewable energy is bringing good jobs to the Midwest. Is anyone in Washington paying attention? And we've talked about this before.
A report by the Natural Resources Defense Council lays out how clean jobs are more numerous than those of fossil fuels just about everywhere in the Midwest. Renewable energy jobs are growing while fossil fuel jobs fall.
And they're good paying jobs.
They're good paying jobs, and they'd grow faster if we had an administration that wanted to foster them.
That's what this article's all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they call him Donnie in this article. And they say, Donnie, wake up.
Did you see the thing that was in the news yesterday and today about the new species that was named after him?
No, I didn't.
It buries its head in the sand, right? I think that's
I didn't see
I didn't catch
no.
the species, but I
It's
caught
a
the feature.
species. Well, the species
like an
name is
ostrich or-
Donald Trumpy, but it's
Trumpy eye.
it's a species of blind amphibian that
Oh.
Well, they may have nailed it then.
and it is a legless amphibian, so it looks
Looks like a snake.
like a snake, but the pictures of it make it
Nailed
look
it.
very much like an earthworm.
Yeah.
And it burrows in the ground, so its head is in the ground all the time. in a hole.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's an interesting parallel to what's happening in Vermont right now. And Vermont has been a progressive leader in so many ways on so many issues over the years. What's
Yes.
happening right now with renewable energy in Vermont is not that story. And unfortunately, particularly over the last couple of years, we did a lot of things right early on, got our solar revolution, got our renewable revolution going, and it has slowed down. And last year we actually lost jobs in the renewable industry and solar jobs, good jobs, for the first time in over a decade. And that's a story that I don't think a lot of people have paid a lot of attention to, and it's one that feels
I don't think they have
confusing.
either.
It's a contradiction,
Yeah,
I think,
it
to
is
how
a
we view ourselves
contradiction.
as Vermonters. And that is a data I haven't seen yet for this year, but I'm concerned that trend has continued. And certainly the
Yes.
folks I work with in the renewable industries, the stories are dire at the moment. Folks are having
Well, they
a
are.
hard time
They-
making their next quarter. They're having a hard time keeping everyone on board and keeping these good-paying jobs moving forward, let alone growing, which we were doing for almost a decade.
We must move on.
Let us move on.
Let us move on.
We got another picture coming up.
We do. That is I think that's a generic wind turbine picture. No, it's from, but you know,
I don't have a nose as to where that one.
Oh, I've got
So I
no
think
idea.
it's-
But
I
the
think it's
pictures
generic.
come with the articles.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you have for a title, Tom?
2 U.S. electric utilities have promised to go 100% carbon-free, and they admit it's cheaper.
Which is why they decided to do it.
Duh.
Bit of a
Two
theme
U.S.
here.
Huh?
Bit of a theme here.
Yeah. 2 U.S. electric utilities recently declared something remarkable. It's cheaper to tear down their coal plants and build renewable energy plants than to keep the old boilers running. Get ready for more as economics and politics come to a consensus.
I didn't write the names of these two companies down. I
I
think
think-
one of them's American Electric Power.
Well, I think one of them is Excel. I might be wrong about that.
Okay.
But you know, one of the things that I mention this, and people don't really understand this. If you think about it, you could actually power the grid 100% with solar and wind, and nothing
If you can't
else.
do it now, you can by next Tuesday.
And nothing else, because if you've got enough of this stuff,
Yeah.
you can power it. And if you've got too much power, you can
You got
furl the
storage
wind turbines.
technology is coming along
Storage
quickly.
technology is coming along. It is not possible to power the grid exclusively with baseload power. It can't be
You
done.
said that already, yeah.
Well, you can't do it with just solar either. I mean, it's the,
You can power the grid with solar and
Solar storage.
storage.
Well, you could
maybe,
yeah.
but
You can. I mean, there's tiny countries that do this already.
sure.
Anybody who's got an off the grid house is doing something like that.
Sure.
Well, storage isn't just batteries either. I mean, we got pump storage. Or we got
They're
one
tough.
bizarre one that's actually quite brilliant. They're lifting up and down concrete blocks.
Concrete blocks running. One of the ones that you mention all the time is running stones up and down hills on
On a
railroads.
train.
The beauty of the large wind, though, in the mix is that wind and solar happen to complement each other
They
as far as the
complement.
timing of
Very,
productivity.
very well.
And you throw in, you know, we've been talking for a couple of weeks about a nice little combined cycle natural gas plant in California, about the size of the Vermont Yankee plant in terms of its capacity, which is being shut down because it can't compete with solar and wind. And so what they're doing, you know, PG&E was told by the California Public Works Commission, you've got to replace this plant because it costs too much. It's hitting people's pocketbooks. So they put out bids and they're replacing it with 500 megawatts of battery.
We had a picture up here last week in one of our articles
Yeah.
of an area where there was wind, solar, and cows,
Yeah.
all in the same spot.
Yes. Okay. What do you got next, Tom?
Well, I had something from the other one here. The goal is now to retire the coal plants and exceed the economy-wide climate targets set in the Paris Agreement.
Yeah.
Committing to 100% carbon-free goal is good for business.
Right.
Duh.
Yeah.
The next one coming along is the one you want, though.
Yeah, well,
US
the one that we just talked about, by the way,
Yeah.
is from Quartz. I didn't mention that, I don't think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
U.S. CO2 emissions increased by 3% in 2018, says Trump's own administration.
The Energy Information Administration published new numbers this week showing energy-related CO2 emissions for 2018 will increase by 3%, undermining its own fragile attempts to highlight the drop in CO2 emissions that happened in 2017, which, by the way, weren't that great. And, you know...
No, but they were a step in the right direction, eh?
Yeah, that was arranged, thank you very much, by President Obama.
Well, that's what I was going to point out. It is a lagging indicator, right? You see the data the
What
next
can you
year.
say?
The last sentence, here's the takeaway from that touches on that.
Yeah.
But given the Trump administration's relentless drive simultaneously to expand fossil fuel development and use and to roll back Obama-era climate policies,
Right.
it is probably foolish to accept the EIA's expectation of a decline in CO2 emissions next year.
I don't know, but you know, we've got
Well,
good
he's
news
talking
too.
politics. He's not talking reality.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
We
we
got a
are.
nice picture coming up here. I like this picture.
Yep, it's a
let's
good
get it
picture.
up
We're
here.
up to Saturday, December 15th, and
Come
this
on,
is an
picture.
item from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists.
There we go.
There you
This
go.
I like that tree. That is
It's a
something
nice
else.
tree. It looks like a bonsai in full size. What do you got, Tom, for
Well,
a title?
a tree in the middle of a desert for one thing.
Yeah, well, I
Okay.
wondered if that was photo op when I saw it, and I think I'm still unconvinced that it isn't.
Well, it looks like a kind of a dead tree, so I
Well-
don't know what's going on there.
Yeah,
Well, the EU, Canada, New Zealand, and developing countries are vowing to keep up the fight. This is an interesting read.
yes.
This is a good article.
The EU and scores of developing countries pledged to toughen their commitments to reduce carbon gas emissions to enable the world to stay within a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in global warming. The promise follows increasingly dire scientific warnings.
Read that again.
The promise follows increasingly dire scientific
Yeah, we've
warnings.
talked about
We
that,
have.
and they are
this
indeed dire.
This is the theme, and people don't, anybody. I've got to a point where I cannot understand anybody who has any intelligence denying that this is going on, which is, I'll put that a different way. I believe that Donald Trump is not speaking from intelligence.
Well, there's
Duh.
there's the head in the sand piece as well. I
Well,
think
you
there's
know,
a
he's-
willful ignorance here.
Yeah, he says that, I have read that he says his IQ is 203. Now, I don't know that he actually said that, but that's what I've read. I want to point out to the world,
Yeah.
to Donald Trump in particular, the way you arrive at an IQ is not by summing up the IQs of the people who tell you what to think.
Well, there's a takeaway from here. Now, this is, of course, this article is about the recent talks in Poland.
Yes.
And by the way, it was written by somebody named Fiona Harvey. Any relation?
Not that I know of.
Well, anyhow, the UN Secretary General made an impassioned intervention to rescue the talks, which have been distracted by U.S., Russian, and Saudi moves, who just happen to be fossil fuel powers,
Yeah.
to downgrade scientific advice. And this is a quote now. We're running out of time. To waste this opportunity would compromise our last best chance to stop runaway climate change. It would not be immoral, it would be suicidal.
Well, I
A
have...
little scary.
Yes, I have occasionally, and I want to point out, I voted for Richard Nixon twice. I voted for Gerald Ford. I voted for Ronald Reagan twice. I voted for George Bush twice. I voted for Bob Dole. I voted for George W. Bush once. I want to point out that I think that it would be reasonable for the UN to ask the United States to extradite Donald Trump for trial for crimes against humanity.
Well, you're not the first to mention that.
No, I'm not. I know that.
When was the moment? When was the moment you switched?
The moment I switched was when I saw the let's see, I forget what, it was the Arbor Day Foundation, I think, was hired by the the Department of Agriculture to come up with the hardiness zone maps. And they came up with a map. The map was published and it was withdrawn within 2 weeks. And it wasn't officially published, but unofficially it was released. And the Department of Agriculture under George W. Bush said, we're not going with that map because it's wrong. And if you looked at the map, it was very clear that half of the United States was in a warmer agricultural growing zone, a hardiness zone, than it had been, which means that the average temperature of the coldest night of the year in the United States had increased by 5 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a super serious problem. It means
And the growing zones are moving north.
they're moving north. It means that our maple
trees.
syrup industry is hit. It means ticks that spread Lyme disease are moving farther and farther north. The ticks that I always come up with, the moose ticks, or the winter ticks, a fully engorged adult female winter tick is about the size of a grape. Moose have been found with 70,000 of these things on them, dead, of course, because they've been bled to death. And I called the Fish and Game people in New Hampshire, and they told me that something upwards of 80% of moose calves in New Hampshire are dying because of these ticks.
Wow, 80%.
80%. So, you know, if you happen to be a member of the National Rifle Association and interested in hunting, and I was a life member of the National Rifle Association, not that I hunted, but if you were interested in hunting, all of a sudden you're hit with a situation where you can't hunt anymore, not for moose, because there aren't enough of them. And I am no longer a member of the National Rifle Association. I resigned when they endorsed Donald Trump.
Well, my father-in-law and everyone else I know has gotten deer this year. Just covered
Deer is
with
not
ticks.
a problem. Yeah.
But even there, they're noticing a huge difference.
Yeah. Deer know how to groom for them. The moose don't know how to groom for them because the moose
never evolved into that.
They didn't evolve that. The area for moose and the area for ticks never overlapped until now.
Yep.
So this is what's happening, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and it's everything that's happening.
What a powerful microcosm for the whole issue, too, right?
Right.
I mean,
we have on Elliott Street in Brattleboro, Vermont, in a corner of the yard, we have a peach tree. Not planted. This is a volunteer peach tree. Nature just said
it grows
this,
peaches.
and it grows peaches.
that is unbelievable to me.
Well, it is southern Vermont, you know.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, we have people are planting pawpaws,
Yeah.
and I honestly think that's what is going to replace maple in our agriculture.
Well, it doesn't look good for the maple people, that's
No,
for sure.
it doesn't look good for ski resorts, and it doesn't. You know,
it
you can go
doesn't.
down the list
Yeah.
of things in Vermont that it doesn't look good for.
I
And
think-
unfortunately, we've got a government that says, "Yeah, and by the way, it's not going to be good for solar either." So what is it good for? Well, it's good for burning coal in Vermont. If you want to burn coal in Vermont, there's
Great.
a president of the United States who's right there with you. He digs coal.
If you make that list of the things that make Vermont iconic, you know, think of the imagery, our history, the tourism industry, everything, it's all impacted, and it's
Oh,
all
sure.
it's all terrifying.
It's what makes Vermont, for God's
yeah,
sake.
yeah.
Yeah,
Really
and
is.
if you look at the breeds of cattle that will be here in 100 years, based on what scientists say about climate change,
It's not going to be the whole
it's
size.
not going to be the ones we've got now,
Yeah.
and the cheeses that we make will not be the same.
Won't be jerseys, yeah.
No, it won't be jerseys.
Yeah.
It might be Brahmins. I don't know. But anyway, we should keep
Yeah,
going.
let's move along here.
Okay.
U.S.-based corporations view climate change as a risk to bottom line and reputation.
This is from Clean Technica.
Interesting point.
Yep, environmental nonprofit and investment research provider CDP published a report based on responses from 2,000 U.S. companies on climate change. Growing numbers view it as a risk both to profits and reputation among consumers and investors.
What's apparent from this round of disclosures is the lack of coherent policy across the whole country and the inherent risk such a situation is creating for companies.
Yes.
A climate of uncertainty in the U.S. is a distraction. And the aspects of our economy that are suffering the most is real estate, insurance, and airlines.
Yeah, but it's going to be other things coming up too.
Well, the real estate, you know, we got shorefront property disappearing.
Yeah.
You know, so there's the real
Mr.
estate.
President, Mr. President, shorefront property is
Then we got the
disappearing.
insurance people because they're getting whacked.
Yeah, they can't insure properties in a lot of places.
yeah.
So the Trump administration this morning put out a revised statement on this, saying there's 30 years, nothing to worry about for the next 30 years for the
30
economy.
years, tell that to the people who are trying to figure out what to do with the roads in Miami.
It's insane.
It is insane, literally insane.
You don't see a lot of new businesses headquartering their businesses in Miami. I think the private industry is.
Well, Miami's I would
hedging their bets here. Yeah,
real
yeah.
estate right now.
There's already a trend in Miami for people who are wealthy and have shorefront properties to move farther inland
Yeah,
into
yeah.
places.
Exactly.
Little Haiti was the name of the neighborhood that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Little Haiti, real estate prices are going up because people are moving there because it's 12 feet higher.
Yeah.
And
They're moving the Haitians out of there.
They're moving the Haitians out, and these people, they can't live within their means in Miami, so they have to move elsewhere. This is the change is already underway, and this is not a change that's driven by people who are making dire warnings. This is change because people are aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
It's driven by wealthy people who have real estate on the ocean.
Well, it's the additional tragedy of it is it impacts the marginalized, disenfranchised populations the most and first.
Yep.
Well,
Okay.
moving along, we got another picture coming up here.
And we do, and this is
And this one we should recognize by now.
yes. This
There it is.
picture, this wind farm, Block Island Wind Farm. I have no idea how many different pictures we've had of it, but we've had a
That's
lot.
it. That's the whole wind farm.
That's the whole wind farm. Yeah, and that's 30 megawatts. So when you hear this story,
What is this? It's generating all the electricity Block Island needs. It used to be done by diesel.
diesel, yeah. So what do you got for a title, Tom?
This is an interesting one, but very interesting when you look deep into it. The potential largest offshore wind farm in the world was auctioned off for a record price.
Largest
record.
in the world. The United States is working on the largest wind farm
Well, it could
in the
be.
world.
Yeah, because other people are working on big ones too.
Well, I don't know that they're working on anything this big. The rights to establish wind farms off Massachusetts coast sold for a record-setting $405 million total, according to federal officials. The area auctioned could generate 4.1 gigawatts, enough electricity to potentially power nearly 1.5 million homes. The largest wind farm in the world, offshore wind farm in the world right now, is the Walney Extension.
The one in Australia.
No, offshore. It's
Oh, offshore. Okay. Yeah.
Walney Extension, 700 megawatts. So this is 4.1 gigawatts, or 4.1 thousand megawatts, compared to the biggest, which is 700.
Yeah.
Each of the individual three components in this huge wind farm is bigger than the Walney Extension by itself. This is big.
Well, this is interesting because the amount of money they bid is 3 times the previous auctions.
Yeah, that also is interesting. These people who are developing these things are seeing that there's money to be made, saving people money, and paying more money for the rights to the federal government, which of course Donald Trump says is wonderful,
Well,
even though he hates offshore wind.
From something else that I read that's not part of what we're going to talk about, it looks like a lot of the bidders in this were energy companies.
Yes.
Okay, so this is an interesting development.
Sure.
Because the people who own the oil are bidding
Yes.
now on wind.
BP and Shell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Although I want to point out, BP is British Petroleum.
Yep.
That's what BP
Yes.
stands for. It did stand
It
for.
did stand for
Shell is
It's
Royal Dutch,
Dutch
Shell,
Shell.
which is Anglo-Dutch.
Anglo-Dutch. Yep.
So this is not ExxonMobil, although ExxonMobil is getting into this kind of thing. Okay, we're up to Sunday, December 16th, and we have an item
Well,
here
we
from
got
the
a
BBC.
takeaway from the article.
Oh,
here.
you want to do a takeaway?
Yeah, this is
Okay.
an important takeaway. President Donald Trump, however, has voiced opposition to world wind turbines. Quote, "The wind kills all your birds. All your birds killed. You know, the environmentalists never talk about that."
No, they never talk about that. Man.
Well, the wind does kill birds, but as we know here, not very many of them.
And, you know, the statistics I've seen show that the wind turbines save about 20 birds
Well,
to
cooling
40
towers
birds.
kill birds.
Yeah,
It's
20
a-
to 40 birds for every bird they kill.
It's a bogus argument.
It is.
Wind
Exactly.
turbines
That's
kill an
exactly
astronomically
right.
small amount of birds. And put this in context of what's happening with climate change
Get you up here.
and what will happen to our bird populations. That's the existential threat, is the change that's happening because of our energy choices.
The Audubon Society is worried about some birds that are not threatened in the slightest, like the Baltimore Oriole and, believe it or not, the bald eagle, American bald eagle. They're saying the American bald eagle could
It's doing
be
pretty
in
well,
trouble.
isn't it?
Doing pretty well compared to what it was when we had DDT all over the
Yeah.
place. But it could be in trouble with climate change. And little story, you know, when I started really looking into birds and wind turbines several years ago. Did a search for I was trying to find out how many birds are killed by wind turbines. 2012, 440,000 birds. That's just a statistic that came up. It's in retrospect, it sounds like it's too high, but I thought to myself, how do they know that? What do they do? So I started looking online for research papers, peer-reviewed papers dealing with avian mortality, and I found a paper on avian mortality, and it talked about an inventory and how it was done at one site. And at that one site, they estimated 5,000 birds were killed, and of that, 2/3 were estimated. They were guessed sort of to be killed, but 1,700 of them, they actually knew that the generating equipment was responsible for those birds. Now here's the catch on this. What was the site? Crystal River, Florida. 6 coal burning stations and 1 nuclear. No wind turbines. And what was the inventory period? 48 hours during migration season. So 440,000 birds in 1 year, that's 1 bird every 73 seconds. 5,000 birds in 48 hours, that's 1 bird every 35 seconds. At one site, not a wind turbine around.
Okay. So we're saying
the wind turbines are saving birds on the net. There's a net savings.
yeah.
You know,
Well,
20
it's
to
being
40
painted
birds
the other way.
saved for every bird that's killed. So yeah.
Well,
Again, I'm pushing this because we're talking too much.
well,
Okay.
we're back to COP24, which we talked about a lot last week.
Yep, and we have is this where we have a picture?
No, the picture's the next one.
Oh, it's the next one. Okay.
COP24 climate change deal to bring pact to life.
BBC gave us this. In Poland, negotiators finally secured agreement on a range of measures that will make the Paris Climate Pact operational in 2020. Rows over carbon markets delayed the end of the conference by a full day, and some observers say it is not sufficiently strong given the urgency of the climate problem.
Well, takeaway just about exactly what you said. It's what's possible, but not what's necessary.
Yeah, in other words, what they have agreed to is what they can do, not what they need to do.
Exactly. Well, the oil producing companies basically try to sabotage that conference.
And coal. You know, they had displays of how wonderful coal was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The Polish government put up coal on display at COP24. They had big display areas with wire mesh holding in coal. They were the ugliest displays I've ever seen. And the United States was selling coal-based jewelry. We should move on, Tom, get away from that. Okay, now we have these wind turbines coming up, and this is from the Hutchinson News.
Now let's get the wind turbines up.
Yeah,
here
let's
now.
do that.
Here we go.
There you
by
go.
Jove. And again, they haven't identified where they are, but the article is about Kansas.
Well, the wind turbines, I believe, are in Kansas.
Did they come from the article?
Yeah.
They
Oh, yeah.
probably
This
are.
came with the article.
Fortune 500 companies betting on Kansas wind.
Well, earlier building surges sprung from tax breaks and pressure on utilities to wean themselves off fossil fuels. But now Fortune 500 companies that are new to electricity business are risking their own money on straight-up profit potential of prairie breezes.
Well, what they're saying is there's a wave of wind farms under construction,
Yeah.
and the big users like Target and T-Mobile are buying into this, and they're buying huge blocks of power and reselling it.
Yeah, and a lot of these companies, the Fortune 500 companies that are particularly interested in this, are companies that are big users of electricity.
Absolutely.
Themselves they are, but they're buying more than they need, and they're becoming electricity wholesalers. It's honest. It's legal.
Yeah, and really that tells you a lot about what is holding us back. It's a matter of there's a couple of old guys, older than I am even, who are worried about maintaining their profits, and they don't have time to figure out a new business plan and live with that risk of that. It's just laziness.
Actually,
It's about
they
that
probably
simple,
are,
yeah.
but they're not talking about it.
What's that?
They probably are figuring this out, but they're not talking about
Well,
it. We
no,
found last week Exxon was buying into
I know.
wind for their own use.
The ones I've got in my mind,
Oh,
I don't think they're talking about it, even among themselves. I don't think their minds are that supple. Yeah. Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah, this is an interesting one.
This
too.
next one is a really interesting, and it's back to transportation.
Yeah. it's
California says all city buses must be emission-free by 2040.
A dire government report about devastating impacts of climate change has motivated cities and states to act. California is the first state to mandate that mass transit agencies buy fully electric buses only starting in 2029 and have fully electric fleets by 2040. You know, in my own mind, this is backwards. The city of Shenzhen has over 16,000 buses, and every single one of them is electric.
Well, it costs more to buy an electric bus,
60% more.
but it costs a lot less to run it.
Yes, the payback is something like 5 years.
The payback is pretty good.
It's a good payback. The United States is manufacturing 1,000 electric buses a year. The Chinese are manufacturing 100,000 electric buses a year. We've barely got our toe in the water when it comes to a market that is a $50 billion a year market. And why is that happening? Well, I will put it on the people who are running the show, for the behest of people who dig holes in the ground for that blind amphibian worm to crawl into.
Well, let's move along now. We got something very interesting coming up.
Yes, we do, and it's.
I love this one.
You got a picture here
from Monday, December 17th, and we've got this from CNN. Believe it or not,
kind of an interesting picture for an energy show, isn't
well,
it?
it's interesting for CNN too,
the
but
Lorax.
nevertheless. The Lorax, by the way, is that little orange guy at the bottom middle of the screen with
we can't pick him up there, but I'll tell you in a second what the Lorax is. But
yeah, go ahead.
when a pipeline threatened national forests, a federal court invoked Dr. Seuss.
A panel of federal judges. This is a panel, not just one nut. This is a panel of judges. Cited a Dr. Seuss character to block construction of
for a while.
Yeah, do that. Block construction of a gas pipeline. Quote, we trust the United States Forest Service to speak for the trees, for the trees have no tongues. That speak for the trees have no tongues is a
quote.
That is a quote that they quoted. So that is in quote now, for two quotes. The panel ruling states citing Dr. Seuss's Orange Environmental Ambassador.
Well, the Lorax, in quotes, is a 1971 environmental fable about the titular creature, that little orange guy. He's the Lorax, and his fight to save the exploited truffula trees, and you can see all those truffula trees in the picture there.
Yeah, they look like.
And the bad guy is the Onceler. So and this is from the article, from the book. Does everyone need a thneed? I mean, Dr. Seuss makes up words. You know?
Yeah, he did.
Once the Onceler arrives, he starts cutting down truffula trees to make thneeds that people want but no one needs. All this rhymes, you know.
Yes, of course.
So,
Well, the underground natural gas pipeline planned by a Virginia power company would stretch 600 miles across West Virginia, and North Carolina.
Oh dear.
Through a total of 21 miles of Virginia's George Washington and Monongahela National Forests, and right across the Appalachian
And you know
Trail.
what this makes me think of is that the report from the International Energy Agency that says we're going to be up against a wall on oil and gas by 2020. And
we're running out.
Yeah, we're running out, and they
They're not
say
even
we're going to
talking
be
about
able to
that.
meet 60% of our demand by 2025. Yeah, why would we build any gas infrastructure or oil infrastructure at this time? This is a really bad time to do it.
Well, it depends on who's paying for it.
You know, well, it does, doesn't it?
we'll see the orange-haired characters we've discussed today. This is
You want me to
certainly
put it back up?
my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about him for a second. You want to look?
Put him back.
He's up there. Whoop.
I just pointing out that I like this guy better than the other orange-haired guy we discussed.
I'm
The
sorry.
other orange-haired guy?
That's
I grew up in a world where nobody ever said anything bad about the President of the United States.
But you didn't have a president this bad. Sorry about that.
I remember somebody saying
Some of these
something
guys used to look up to him.
slightly negative about Dwight Eisenhower. And I was, how can they
I didn't say
possibly
anything
do
bad
that?
about Eisenhower.
Yeah,
Everybody loved Eisenhower.
Yeah,
Even the Democrats loved Eisenhower.
yeah. At one point, even the Russians loved Eisenhower. But yeah.
Well, we'll move along to the Trump administration.
Yes, this is from Queen
And their
Topeka.
statement at COP24 doubles down on backwards thinking.
The U.S. national statement to COP24 representatives made plain the path that the United States was planning to take. It reiterated Donald Trump's intention of withdrawing from the Paris Accord and reasserted intentions of including fossil fuels in its energy mix.
Well, again, from this article, once
Yeah.
again, the Trump administration is pandering to corporate polluters at the expense of those suffering the worst impacts of climate change.
Yep.
From boasting about fossil fuel production to refusing endorsement of the staggering UN IPCC report on the climate crisis, which is very dire, as we have said.
Yes.
The official U.S. response to COP24 has been deeply disturbing.
Yes.
And it has been.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We have to move on. We've got 7 items and about
we are
14
now
minutes
on-
to talk about them.
We're now on Monday, so we're halfway through Monday. Almost through Monday. Let's get another picture up here.
Yep. That's an ore
And
processing
This
facility.
is an ore processing facility.
This is from PV Magazine Australia.
Current growth in wind and solar supports PV support. Current growth in wind and solar PV supports zero fossil fuels by 2032.
In a presentation to the 2018 Asia Pacific Solar Research Conference, Professor Andrew Blakers of the Australian National University pointed out that at the current rates of growth of wind, solar PV, and electricity demand, fossil fuels could be redundant by 2032. Now, this is the flip side of the supply declining, and the flip side says the demand is going to decline to the point that it vanishes 14 years from now.
Well, if we're running out of oil and the demand is going down, it kind of balance each other, isn't it?
We would hope, but it means that anybody who's betting on oil is going to be out of luck.
Unless they're buying short.
This is it is bizarre, but nevertheless, in the light of the next story,
Well, let's finish what Professor Blaker said here.
Yeah.
Solar, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Solar PV is the only practical path to rapid climate stabilization.
Yes.
Now he's talking about Australia, of course.
I don't think he's right about that. I think that wind power is too important, and
What he's talking about Australia. And Australia has tremendous potential
it's
for
also
solar.
got tremendous potential for
For wind, yeah, they got both.
And on top of that, we have another thing too. We've got other things, a bunch of other things. We've got to deal with biodigesters because we've got to deal with the waste that
well,
they
that's
process.
going to start making a lot of sense economically.
Absolutely. Let's
Let's
go
move
on.
along. We're into
PV
Tuesday
Magazine
now.
USA.
New York Governor Cuomo calls for 100% carbon neutral electricity by 2040 via the Green New Deal. And remember that phrase, Green New Deal, because we're going to be
this is
hearing a
going to
lot
be a
about
big
it.
one. Not satisfied with launching the most ambitious initiative for the whole-scale overhaul of the utility sector through reforming the energy vision, Governor Cuomo announced a carbon-neutral electricity supply by 2040 as one of his legislative priorities. Now, when you stack this on top of the thing that we just said, he's saying he wants to be carbon neutral by 2040, and this professor in Australia says, well, the world is going to have no need for fossil fuels by 2032. It makes his goal look
Well, they
eminently
ought to talk to
achievable.
each other once in a while.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Tom-
Cuomo's goal... Cuomo's call to move to 100% carbon neutral electricity, by the way, that includes nuclear,
yeah.
okay, in New York, is a more aggressive timeline than has been set in any state to date.
It's similar to what's going on in California and
Hawaii as
It
well.
is that, but
And-
it's a little
and
bit more aggressive, but not by much.
Incoming governor of Colorado wants to take that state
He wants to go further.
further. He
Yep.
wants to do it by 2035. Maybe
2035.
he was talking to that guy in Australia. Okay, our next item is from PV Magazine USA. And
And we got a picture
there's
here
a
coming
picture
up.
for that.
Yeah.
A picture of Niagara Falls. So,
That is, in fact, Niagara Falls.
yeah.
Well, you know, from a standpoint of energy, Niagara Falls is a very important place. It
Yeah.
was one of the very first, if not the first, major hydro production of electricity in the country.
Yeah.
It goes back over 100 years.
Yep.
And it's in both the United States and Canada, very elaborate. I mean, they've got controls here to shut the water flow off at night, generate power, and turn it back on during the day for the tourists.
Right.
Which makes sense. I mean, tourism is very big up there.
What do you got for a title, Tom?
New York officially ups its energy storage goal 3 gigawatts by 2030.
An initiative to increase New York energy storage targets has been approved by the New York State Public Service Commission. The state now is on a trajectory to deploy 1.5 gigawatts of energy storage by 2025. That's just around the corner, before doubling and reaching up to 3 gigawatts by 2030.
And of course, the Niagara connection here is a big energy storage project.
Sure.
Very big, and it's binational because there's our water and there's the Canadian water
Yep.
right opposite each other, and they agree to agree.
Yep.
You know, they fixed it all up.
Our next item is from HuffPost, the Huffington Post.
Green New Deal. What did I just say? That? The Green New Deal has overwhelming bipartisan support, a poll finds, at least for now.
Well-
It's interesting because it depends upon how you describe it.
Yes.
If you use the words Green New Deal, it's no
The
good.
conservatives
If
don't
you
want a
talk
Green
about
New Deal.
what the
Content
elements
is,
are, the
yeah.
content is, oh, this is great.
I like that.
When
I like
asked-
that.
When asked how much do you support or oppose the individual policies in the Green New Deal, 81% of registered voters, including 57% of conservative Republicans, say they either somewhat support or strongly support them, a survey showed. So
That's pretty interesting.
it is. It is indeed.
There's a little quick takeaway here, because it's going to change. But the Green New Deal is the most popular policy hardly anyone has ever heard of.
Well, we're gonna be hearing
82%
a
of
lot more
Americans
about it.
say they have heard nothing at all about the proposal.
Yeah, we're going to hear a lot about this
But
one.
we're going to be hearing a lot.
This is big.
I'm excited about this, and I think it's going to impact us here in Vermont
Well,
too.
oh, yeah.
I
people
think there's
are
a
getting on
wave
board.
coming.
Especially on the Democrats. They're all
Yep.
getting on board. Bernie's
Well,
on
you
board,
mentioned-
Alexandria.
Before we started the show, you mentioned the what's the initiative? The Transportation Climate Initiative.
Yep.
And it was interesting to me that Governor Scott has signed off on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Gives me reason for optimism.
Well, the
Yeah.
polling also finds that Americans consider global warming a real issue and support policy changes to address it.
Yep.
This is across the board Americans now.
Now, this next story, I think we should just kind of breeze through if we can. I want to.
Well, I'll try to explain what's going on here because it was confusing. That picture is a Tesla driving through a tunnel.
Yeah.
Okay, now what the article didn't say, you had to go digging for it. Elon Musk has a vision for sustainable electric transportation and clean energy, while eliminating the need to build on an entirely new system that works around gas and diesel. Tunnels will be the interstates of the future. So
Yeah,
that's what this article is
But
all
you
about.
have to have electric vehicles in them. You cannot do gas-powered vehicles in
Well,
tunnels.
yeah, I mean, because of all of the
Emissions.
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 So-
It's like why didn't they have long railroad tunnels for steam locomotives? Because you take the steam engine through there and you can kill everybody on the train.
Wouldn't have survived. Yeah.
The engineer be
All
dead
right,
by
what's
the time he
the,
gets
what's
there.
the title here?
The Boring Company, which I think is owned by Musk,
Yeah, it is.
shows off its functional demo tunnel in Hawthorne, California.
The Boring Company took, I can just see Musk coming up with that name, took the wraps off of its demonstration tunnel in Hawthorne, California. The event opened at the tunnel, which takes the concept up to full scale, working elevators and all. Some event guests rode a Tesla through the tunnel.
Well, his ultimate goal is a fully electrified, traffic-free transportation system for everyone.
Yep.
That, by the way, just happens to use the electric cars he's making.
Yes, or, yeah.
And
Okay.
vehicles can't be just any car off the street. They must be electric, as you already mentioned,
Yeah.
and they must be fully autonomous.
I was
Okay.
gonna ask about
Our next item is from Huffington Post.
We're getting close to the end here, folks.
Yeah, well, we're running out of time.
We're running out
too.
of time here.
So-
President's Council urges solar and microgrid use for energy security, and there is an image coming up here. It's part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. By Jove.
No, that image actually. Oh, wait a minute.
That's what it is.
We
folks.
missed something. D.C. just passed a bill mandating 100%.
Yeah, we did.
All right, 100% renewable power by 2032. I'm sorry, I read the title for you. City lawmakers in the District of Columbia unanimously passed legislation mandating 100% renewable electricity for the capital by 2032. The act doubles Washington's current goal, under which the city would get half of its electricity from zero emission sources by 2032. But since you have already got to the next item from
Well, a quick
Polytechnic-
takeaway from there.
Yeah.
The DC initiative requires that all public transportation and privately owned fleet vehicles would emit zero carbon dioxide by 2045.
Yes.
This is in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, our next item is
Yeah,
from
let's get that
from
image
Clean
up
Technica,
again.
and it has that picture of New Orleans.
New Orleans. President's Council urges solar and microgrid use for energy security.
Important for energy security. We're talking about solar and
Now, this is the
microgrids.
last item on our...
It is.
So
One of the key recommendations of a recent President's National Advisory Infrastructure Council report on cybersecurity and the grid is that microgrids based on solar power and other renewable energy resources be developed for emergency preparedness. So this is for grid security.
Well, what they're talking about is how easy it is for a cyber attacker to attack the grid.
Yeah.
And it is right now.
Yeah.
It is very much so. They don't even mention that nature could do it with a solar emission.
Or
Or the same damn thing.
a bunch of different other things that nature can do that will disrupt the grid, including, a repetition of Hurricane Katrina or
some very
whatever.
large
And we can
windstorms in the Middle East, in
Yeah.
the Midwest.
Yeah, we can expect that. That is what we should
It could
be
happen
expecting.
naturally.
Yeah.
Or by some cyber attacker. So what they're basically saying is we better put in some microgrids here to protect ourselves in case this happens, because we'll still have electricity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the experience, by the way, at Princeton during Hurricane Sandy. Princeton University had buildings.
Princeton University had their own power system.
They had their own power system, and it survived.
And it worked.
Okay, well, let's put us all up, and we'll say goodbye for this program.
Well, I
and
think I can
suggest
do
to
that.
everybody that they come back next week to see the material that we're going to have from Nick.
Well,
Sharek
Nick's not
on-
going to be here next week, but his
Neither
show
is-
will be.
Yeah, neither are we, because the
we're not gonna be
You're wearing the same outfit too.
Yeah, right. I'll have the same shirt on next week. Come back next time.
It's been a real
Adios,
pleasure.
everybody.
Thank you.